The lights inside the Fox Nation studio were unforgiving, bright, hot, deliberate. Every shadow had been erased, every angle calculated for drama. The program was Voice of Values, a primetime show with a clear mission: give conservative voices a place to speak unfiltered, unchallenged, uncancelled. The stage was polished, the air chilled by strong ventilation, yet under the lights, the tension made it feel anything but cool. Host Carson Green, a long-serving media figure known for his right-leaning loyalty, introduced the evening's topic with his usual gravitas. Tonight, we ask, are we lowering standards in the name of representation? And what does it really mean to be qualified to lead? Sitting center stage was Senator JD Vance, polished, sharp-suited, and known for his ruthless rhetorical style. His smirk was calm, but there was a flicker in his eyes. He was waiting for the moment to strike. Opposite him sat Representative Jasmine Crockett, poised, collected, and quiet. She wasn't smiling. Her fingers rested lightly on a folded sheet of paper beside her, almost as if she already knew it might be needed. From the first minute, JD took control. "We're living in an age where emotion is being mistaken for leadership," he began, his tone even but edged. "We've seen tears in congressional hearings. We've seen outbursts and breakdowns. And we're told that's passion, not instability." Without saying her name, he was pointing directly at Jasmine. The audience chuckled. Carson gave a tight smile, unsure whether to rein him in or let him run. JD turned his gaze toward Jasmine. "If someone is so easily overcome during a policy discussion that they break down, can we truly trust them with national responsibility?" The audience laughed louder this time, more confident in their shared mockery. Jasmine didn't shift in her seat. No eye roll, no scoff. She reached for her mic and calmly said, "Some cry out of weakness. Some cry because they finally get to speak. And some laugh because they think someone else's pain is entertainment." That line hit like a brick in a glass room. The laughter died. Carson blinked, unsure of whether to pivot or double down. JD didn't flinch. Instead, he adjusted his sleeve and leaned forward. He changed gears. "Congresswoman, I've read your background file. You were held back in second grade, weren't you?" His voice was smooth, quiet, and cruel. "I think America should expect more from those who sit in Congress." The studio seemed to stop breathing. Not because the statement was clever, it wasn't, but because it was deeply personal and unexpectedly so. It wasn't about policy, or party, or qualifications. It was about a year in the life of a 7-year-old black girl, an old school record that most wouldn't have even remembered, let alone used as political ammunition. The camera panned to Jasmine. She didn't fire back. No flash of anger, no retort. Just a stillness, as if she'd been pulled back in time. Her eyes weren't on JD, not exactly, they were focused somewhere just beyond him, like she was listening to a voice from decades ago. Not his voice. An older one. One that had once told her she wasn't ready. Then she spoke. "I did repeat a grade. Second grade. I remember the day. The teacher didn't look at me, she just stared at a list and said, 'This girl isn't ready.' That was it. No one asked why I didn't turn in the homework. No one asked why I was falling asleep in the morning. No one asked anything at all." Her voice was steady. She turned, finally, to look directly at JD. "You think intelligence is measured by whether or not someone stays on track each year? Maybe. But sometimes, intelligence is knowing why a child falls behind." The studio fell utterly silent. Not awkward, just still. The kind of stillness that comes when a truth lands and no one knows what to do with it. Carson cleared his throat and jumped in. "So, in your view, Congresswoman, how should we measure whether someone is fit to represent others?" Jasmine paused. She didn't fidget or adjust her mic this time. She simply said, "By whether that person is willing to take the same story they were once mocked for, and use it to make sure someone else doesn't feel invisible. I don't need everyone to agree with me. I just need someone who's ever been misunderstood to know they're not alone." No applause. No interruption. But the camera caught something else. A woman in the third row. Hand clenched tight. Brow furrowed. Holding back tears she hadn't expected to feel in a political debate. He leaned back in his seat for a moment, then forward again. His voice was colder now. I'm not denying the hardships you faced. But we're here to talk about qualifications. Isn't it a bit of a paradox that someone who couldn't pass second grade is now writing laws for the nation's children? That line wasn't even dressed up. It was a blade, pointed and deliberate. The host looked frozen. The crowd, unsure. Jasmine said nothing at first. Her fingers turned a page in her notes, not to read, just to move. To keep her hands from trembling. Carson tried to change course. Maybe the senator's point is about standards, about what we expect from our leaders. But JD wasn't done. I'm talking about the personal. Because Jasmine's story represents what's wrong with this country. We're lowering standards in the name of representation. And repeating second grade is just one of many red flags. A few people in the audience murmured agreement. A louder few whispered disapproval. Then Carson looked to his earpiece. The question was coming. A young man stood in the audience. Clean-shaven, white shirt, Liberty Law School badge pinned to his blazer. I also grew up poor, he said. But I never used that as an excuse. My question to Representative Jasmine is this. If you couldn't even pass second grade, what makes you think you deserve to write laws for this country? It was posed like a question, but everyone knew it was a verdict. G leaned back, smiling faintly. Jasmine turned to the young man. What's your name? Dylan. She nodded. Dylan, you said I used an excuse. Do you think a 7-year-old child gets to choose the reasons they were held back? The room began to shift again. You could feel it. Do you think a little girl could say, sorry, teacher, I didn't turn in the homework because we didn't have electricity last night? Because my mom worked night shifts? Because we didn't have dinner again? You think that's an excuse? Dylan said nothing. No one needs to excuse surviving, Dylan. You just have to survive. And if you make it out, maybe you come back and lift someone else. Dylan sat. He didn't speak again. And that's when something happened. The audience didn't laugh. They didn't cheer. They listened, not with their politics, but with their memory. JD tried to pivot again. Touching story, he said, but Congress isn't about personal tales. It's about making decisions. Jasmine didn't hesitate. And it's because too many decisions are made without understanding those personal stories that the law keeps abandoning children like the one I used to be. Carson tried to move forward. But the energy had changed. The stage didn't belong to JD anymore. And somewhere backstage, a producer waved for Carson's attention. A call was coming in. The call came from the control room, but Carson didn't acknowledge it right away. Something had shifted. He could feel it, and so could the audience. JD Vance, who once held the room with icy certainty, now looked like a man watching a tide retreat beneath him. He glanced sideways, then forward. Stay on message, his training echoed. Never apologize, never soften. So he leaned back in his chair, tried to steady the moment. Look, no one here is saying struggle doesn't matter. But we're talking about competency, about clarity of thought. Being relatable isn't the same thing as being right. He was reaching, grasping for authority he no longer fully commanded. Jasmine leaned slightly toward her mic. Her voice remained calm, but there was an unmistakable edge now. Not anger. Precision. Senator, I hear what you're trying to say. But let me be clear, struggle is the reason I sit in this chair. And being right, as you put it, doesn't mean memorizing talking points or quoting statistics. It means understanding what happens when policy touches real people. You call that emotion. I call that experience. The audience didn't erupt, but a murmur of approval passed through it. Something raw, human, and unrehearsed. Then Carson, sensing both risk and opportunity, gestured toward the phones. We're going to take a live question, one that seems to be lighting up our switchboards tonight. A screen lit up. A woman in her late 50s appeared, Zoom frame shaky, background dimly lit. She looked nervous. Hi. My name is Lorraine. I'm calling from East St. Louis. Carson smiled politely. Welcome, Lorraine. What's your question? Lorraine inhaled sharply, eyes flicking to the camera. It's not really a question. It's more of a comment, I guess. I just wanted to say, Congresswoman Crockett, I remember being held back too. It was 5th grade. My mom worked nights. We didn't have a car, and I missed too many days. They said I was slow. But I wasn't. I was just tired. There was a silence. Not uncomfortable. Just heavy. I never thought I'd see someone like me sitting in that seat, Lorraine added, her voice cracking. So thank you. That's all. Carson swallowed and nodded, his professional mask faltering for just a moment. Thank you, Lorraine. Jasmine smiled, just slightly. Thank you for surviving. And then JD did something unexpected. He smiled too, but the wrong kind. Not warm. Not generous. Calculated. This is exactly what I mean, he said, gesturing subtly toward the screen where Lorraine's feed had just cut. We've turned government into a therapy session. Feelings over facts. Stories over standards. We're not here to validate childhood trauma, we're here to protect the Constitution. There was again, the blade. Culture. But the audience didn't laugh this time. In fact, a few visibly winced. Jasmine responded, not louder, but firmer. Senator, the Constitution wasn't written in a vacuum. It was written by people. And people bring their stories to every law they make. You don't get to pretend policy is pure math. Behind every bill is someone's pain, someone's fight to matter. The studio lights seemed dimmer now. Or maybe it was just the contrast, the warmth of Jasmine's words against the chill of JD's rhetoric. Carson interjected again, this time with a clipped tone. Let's bring it back to the original question. Qualifications. Background. Standards. Senator Vance, are you suggesting Representative Crockett is unqualified to serve in Congress? JD paused. Here was the tightrope. Say yes and risk sounding elitist, maybe even cruel. Say no and forfeit the momentum of his argument. He chose ambiguity. I'm saying we have to be honest. We're a nation in decline. And one reason is that we've traded excellence for empathy. We promote people for their stories, not their skill. Carson turned immediately to Jasmine. Your response? She looked directly into the camera now. Not at Carson. Not at JD. Let me tell you what skill looks like. Skill is surviving a system that was never designed for you and still learning how to change it. Skill is standing in a room where you're being belittled and still choosing to speak with clarity and truth. Skill is being told at 7 that you're behind, and by 37, writing the laws that ensure no other child hears that again. It was not just an answer. It was a declaration. Carson sat back. His face neutral, but his eyes revealed something more complicated, respect, perhaps, mixed with the dawning sense that tonight's episode had slipped beyond his control. And then, like clockwork, a producer slipped a note onto his desk. Carson glanced at it and cleared his throat. We've just received a poll update from our live audience. The screen behind them changed. A simple graphic. Who's winning the debate? Before the break, JD had been ahead by 12 points. But Jasmine Crockett, 54%. JD Vance, 39%. Undecided, 7%. Carson blinked, then tried to spin it. Clearly a dynamic conversation tonight. But JD was rattled. He didn't hide it well. I don't care about popularity contests, he snapped. I care about results. We're not running a feelings factory, we're running a nation. Jasmine stayed still. Then, softly, sometimes if you don't understand the feelings, you'll never understand why the nation is broken. And just like that, Carson raised his hand. We're heading into a break. When we return, we'll talk education policy, school funding, and what it means to truly invest in the next generation. The lights dimmed slightly. Music swelled. But backstage, a different kind of storm was brewing. Because someone from JD's team had just texted him one word. Backfire. The studio came back from commercial with the lights slightly dimmed, as if the room itself understood the shift in tone. The audience, now noticeably quieter, leaned in, not out of curiosity, but anticipation. Something had broken open. What began as a political sparring match had turned into something none of them expected. Carson Green, usually crisp and commanding, returned from the break with less polish and more pause in his voice. Welcome back to Fox Nation's Voice of Values. Tonight's conversation has taken us deep into questions of representation, experience, and national standards. He looked toward his right. Senator Vance, you wanted to comment on education policy before the break. The floor is yours. JD sat upright, shoulders back, fingers pressed tightly together. The smile was gone. The sarcasm too. He cleared his throat, visibly choosing his words with more care than before. Look, I respect personal stories, I do. I shared mine when I wrote my book. But at the end of the day, policy is about decisions, not emotion. You can't govern a country by anecdotes. You govern with data, discipline, and leadership. I'm not here to say Jasmine Crockett hasn't worked hard, but I still question whether that work translates into national vision. Jasmine didn't blink. She let the words land, not with resistance, but with recognition. Senator, she said, your story about hunger when you were young, it made millions feel seen. And yet, when I shared mine, you said Congress isn't a therapy room. She turned slowly toward the audience. So here's the truth. When you were hungry, it was a memoir. When I was hungry, it was a punchline. No applause. Just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but charged. Electric. Carson shifted in his chair. Then a soft beep. A live call. The producer gestured. Carson nodded. We have a caller, Miss Ruth, from Garland, Texas. Jasmine looked up. A voice came through, gentle, trembling but steady. I used to tutor Jasmine Crockett. Monday afternoons. 2nd grade. Gasps rippled through the audience. JD leaned forward, incredulous. Of course. His tone dripped doubt, as if waiting for the reveal of some scripted stunt. But Miss Ruth didn't falter. She didn't talk much. Just stared at the floor. I thought she was shy. Then I asked one day why her homework was never done. She shrugged. Said nothing. It took me weeks to find out. She hadn't eaten that day. Not breakfast. Not lunch. Just water from a drinking fountain. The air turned still. She wasn't behind, Ruth continued. She was surviving. Carson's voice cracked slightly. Miss Ruth, is there something you'd like to say directly to Jasmine tonight? Yes, she said. I'm proud. Not because she proved she's smart, but because she proved that no child deserves to be called slow when all they were was hungry. The line went dead. Jasmine didn't speak. She reached slowly into the bag beside her chair, pulled out a worn, laminated sheet of paper. The corner was faded, but the handwriting in the teacher's notes section was unmistakable. This child doesn't need a new school. She needs food. She placed it gently by the microphone. I've carried this paper for 25 years. I never showed it, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't think anyone cared enough to read it. The audience sat frozen. Carson himself didn't breathe. But since someone dared to bring up my 2nd grade, Jasmine continued, I figured I should dare to let people see what the teacher saw and ignored. A woman in the front row began to cry, hand over her mouth, tears slipping through her fingers. And then something no one expected happened. A man stood up, middle-aged, wearing a name badge that read, Tom Garrison, Ohio. He said nothing, just placed a hand over his chest. Then another person stood, a student in a Liberty Law School hoodie. Then a teacher. Then a grandmother. No chance. No protest. Just people standing, quiet, resolved. Not apologizing, but acknowledging. JD looked around, visibly unnerved. For the first time that night, his expression cracked. Not in rage, but uncertainty. Carson cleared his throat, trying to regain control. We kindly ask that audience members remain seated so we can continue. But no one sat. Jasmine turned toward the camera. If you were ever the kid who had to study through a growling stomach, if you were ever told you were slow when you were just tired, if no one asked why you fell asleep in class, then I want you to know I see you. And I haven't forgotten you. This time, the applause did come. Not thunderous, but real. From deep in the chest. Backstage, producers scrambled. Something was shifting beyond the show. Beyond the network. Beyond the screen. The next morning, a 38-second clip aired unedited across all platforms. Just Jasmine. The paper. The words. No one asked why I didn't do my homework. Today someone dared to mention it, so I figured I should dare to share. 4 million views by noon. The hashtag she was hungry trended in over 30 states. But what truly stunned people came later. A tweet from Congressman Harold Guffey, longtime far-right hardliner. I watched last night's debate 3 times. I used to think intelligence was about speed. Maybe it's also about listening to those we ignored. I don't agree with Jasmine on every policy, but on this, I think I need to listen. Shockwaves. Some conservatives accused him of weakness. Others said nothing. But behind the scenes, a slow ripple began. Teachers posted. I asked a student if they were tired. They said, no, just hungry. Cafeteria workers shared. I left extra fruit in a lunch tray today. Because, what if? And then, Jasmine posted a photo. The paper. Side by side with a new handwritten note. To all second graders who think math is hard when your stomach aches, you don't have to prove you're worthy to be seen as smart. No hashtags. No caption. But it was shared by over 200,000 accounts in 24 hours. And in a small classroom in Kentucky, a teacher printed the photo. Below it, she added a single line. If a child comes to class without eating, the first thing we ask should be, are you okay? Not, why didn't you do your homework? Jasmine Crockett didn't win an argument that night. She just held up a truth that had waited 25 years to be seen. And sometimes that's the most powerful thing of all.